Walk into any electronics store right now and you'll see them. Massive displays showing crystal clear images that look almost too real to believe. The sales associate will guide you over, eyes gleaming, and start talking about the future of television. 8K resolution, they'll say. 4 times the detail of 4K. 33 million pixels working together to create the most lifelike image ever displayed on a screen. And then they'll show you the price tag, somewhere between $2,000 and $8,000 depending on the size and brand. And they'll tell you this is where the industry is headed. That if you want to future-proof your purchase, if you want the absolute best picture quality available today, 8K is the only choice that makes sense. But here's what they're not telling you, what the manufacturers don't want you to figure out, and what the marketing departments have spent millions of dollars trying to hide behind impressive tech demos and carefully staged comparison displays. 8K televisions in 2025 are one of the biggest wastes of money in the entire consumer electronics market. And buying one right now means you're paying a massive premium for technology that you literally cannot use to its full potential and probably won't be able to use for years to come, if ever. This isn't about being anti-technology or anti-progress. This is about the reality of how the television industry works, what content is actually available to watch, how human vision actually functions, and why spending extra money on 8K is throwing cash away when that money could go toward features and quality that actually matter. Let's start with the most fundamental problem, and it's a big one that immediately disqualifies 8K as a worthwhile purchase for almost everyone. There's virtually no native 8K content available to watch right now, and there likely won't be for many years to come if it ever becomes widely available at all. When we say no content, we mean almost nothing. Not on streaming services, not on broadcast television, not on cable, not on Blu-ray, nowhere that normal consumers actually get their entertainment from. Netflix, the largest streaming service in the world, is still working on getting more of their library up to 4K quality, and even that rollout has been slow and limited to their most popular shows and movies. Disney+, Amazon Prime Video, HBO Max, all of these services have some 4K content, but nowhere near their entire libraries, and none of them have announced any concrete plans to move to 8K streaming. Why is this happening? Because streaming 8K content requires absolutely massive amounts of bandwidth and data. An 8K video stream needs somewhere around 80 to 100 megabits per second of sustained internet speed to deliver without compression artifacts, buffering, or quality degradation. Most American households don't have internet connections that fast, and even those that do would burn through data caps incredibly quickly if those streams were running for hours every day. The infrastructure just isn't there to support widespread 8K streaming, and building that infrastructure is going to take years and billions of dollars in investment that streaming services have shown no interest in making when 4K adoption is still incomplete. Broadcast television is even further behind. Most broadcast channels are still transmitting in 1080i or 720p, which is standard HD, not even 4K. The transition to 4K broadcasting has barely started in most markets, and it's going to be years before that's complete. 8K broadcasting would require even more significant upgrades to transmission equipment, bandwidth allocation, and receiver technology. And there's simply no business case for networks to invest in that when the vast majority of viewers don't have 8K displays and won't for the foreseeable future. Even in countries like Japan and South Korea, where they've experimented with 8K broadcasts for special events like the Olympics, it's remained an experimental niche rather than becoming standard practice. Physical media like Blu-ray discs don't offer 8K content either. The newest format, Ultra HD Blu-ray, supports 4K resolution with HDR, and that's where the format has stopped. There are no 8K Blu-ray players on the market, no 8K disc format has been standardized, and given that physical media sales have been declining for years as streaming takes over, it's questionable whether an 8K physical format will ever be developed for consumer use. The film and television production industry is slowly moving toward capturing content in 8K for future proofing and for the flexibility it provides in post-production editing, but that doesn't mean they're releasing it in 8K for consumers to watch. Most productions that shoot in 8K are mastering their final products in 4K or even lower resolutions, because that's what distribution channels support and what audiences actually have the equipment to view. So what does this mean for you if you buy an 8K TV? It means that everything you watch on it, literally everything, is going to be upscaled content rather than native 8K. The TV has to take a 4K, 1080p, or even 720p source and use processing algorithms to artificially increase the resolution to fill all those 8K pixels. Now, modern upscaling technology has gotten pretty good, and the processors in high-end 8K TVs do a decent job of making lower resolution content look sharp and detailed. But upscaling is not, and never will be the same as native content. It cannot create detail that wasn't captured in the original source. It can make educated guesses about what should be there, it can sharpen edges and smooth gradients, but it's fundamentally interpolating and inventing information rather than displaying what was actually filmed. And here's the thing about upscaling. The jump from 1080p to 4K native content is dramatic and easily visible to most people at normal viewing distances. But the jump from 4K to 8K, even with native content, which again you don't have access to, is far less noticeable because of how human vision works and the distances at which people actually watch television. The human eye has limits to its resolving power, meaning there's a maximum amount of detail it can distinguish at any given distance. For a typical living room setup, where you're sitting 8 to 10 feet away from your TV, the difference between 4K and 8K resolution becomes incredibly difficult to perceive unless you have absolutely perfect vision and you're specifically looking for differences. Multiple studies have been done on this, and the results are consistent. At normal viewing distances for screen sizes that actually fit in typical homes, the vast majority of people cannot reliably tell the difference between a high-quality 4K image and an 8K image, especially when viewing real-world content rather than specifically designed test patterns. You would need to either sit much closer to the screen than is comfortable, much closer than anyone actually watches TV, or you would need a screen so massive that it wouldn't physically fit in most living rooms to consistently see the resolution benefit of 8K over 4K. And we're talking about native 8K content here. With upscaled content, which is all you actually have access to, the differences become even smaller and even harder to perceive. So the first major problem with 8K TVs is that there's nothing to watch on them that actually uses their full resolution, and there likely won't be for years. But that's not the only problem. The second issue is that the push toward 8K is pulling resources, engineering effort, and manufacturing capacity away from improvements that would actually make a difference in picture quality that you can see and appreciate. When a TV manufacturer decides to build an 8K model, they have to dedicate their best processors to handling the computational load of driving all those pixels. They have to source extremely expensive panels. They have to engineer complicated scaling algorithms. And all of that effort and expense comes at the cost of other features that matter much more for real-world viewing quality. Things like local dimming performance, which determines how well the TV can display deep blacks and bright highlights simultaneously. Things like color accuracy and color volume, which determine how natural and vibrant the image looks. Things like motion handling, which determines whether fast-moving sports and action scenes look smooth or juddery. Things like viewing angles, which determine whether the picture quality holds up when you're not sitting directly in front of the screen. Things like HDR implementation, which makes a far bigger difference in perceived image quality than resolution increases beyond 4K. All of these factors contribute enormously to how good a TV looks in actual use. And all of them are often compromised in 8K sets because so much of the engineering budget and panel cost went into achieving that 8K resolution that most people can't even fully appreciate. Look at the TV review data from sites like RTings or Consumer Reports, and you'll find that many of the best performing TVs in terms of overall picture quality are high-end 4K models, not 8K models, because those 4K sets are putting all their engineering effort into things that actually matter, rather than chasing a resolution spec that provides diminishing returns. A top-tier 4K OLED or mini LED TV with excellent contrast, perfect blacks, wide color gamut, and great motion handling will look dramatically better in real-world viewing than an 8K TV with mediocre contrast and poor local dimming performance, especially when both are showing the same 4K or lower resolution source material that's actually available to watch. The third problem with 8K TVs is the cost, and we're not just talking about the purchase price, although that's significant enough. An 8K TV typically costs anywhere from 50% to 150% more than a comparable 4K TV of the same size and from the same brand. So you're spending an extra $1,000, $2,000, maybe even $3,000 or more to get those extra pixels that you can't actually use. But beyond the initial cost, 8K TVs also have higher power consumption than equivalent 4K models because driving all those extra pixels requires more processing power and more backlight brightness to achieve the same perceived brightness levels. Over the lifespan of the TV, that increased power consumption adds up to hundreds of dollars in additional electricity costs that you're paying for no real benefit. There's also the future cost consideration. Technology products depreciate, and they depreciate fast. The 8K TV you buy today for $4,000 is going to be worth a fraction of that in 3 to 5 years. As the technology becomes more common, manufacturing costs come down, and newer models are released. But here's the thing, that depreciation happens whether or not 8K content ever actually becomes available. You're not making an investment that's going to hold its value. You're buying an early adopter product that's going to lose value rapidly, regardless of whether the promised future of 8K content ever materializes. And if that future doesn't materialize, if streaming services and broadcasters decide that 4K is good enough and the infrastructure costs of moving to 8K don't make business sense, then your 8K TV becomes a very expensive white elephant that you overpaid for significantly. Now let's talk about what TV manufacturers and salespeople will say to try to convince you that 8K is worth it despite all of these problems. They'll talk about future-proofing, The idea that you're buying now for content that will be available later. But future-proofing only makes sense if that future is actually coming within the useful lifespan of your purchase. Most people keep a TV for 5 to 8 years before replacing it. If 8K content doesn't become widely available within that time frame, which all the current evidence suggests it won't, then you didn't future-proof anything. You just overpaid for specs you never got to use. And even if 8K content does start to become available toward the end of your TV's lifespan, the 8K TVs available then will be dramatically better and cheaper than what you can buy today, meaning you would have been better off buying a great 4K TV now and upgrading to 8K later if and when it actually makes sense. They'll also talk about upscaling, claiming that even though there's no native 8K content, the superior processing in 8K TVs makes your existing 4K and HD content look better through upscaling. And there's a tiny grain of truth to this. High-end 8K TVs do generally have very good video processors because they need them to handle all those pixels. But here's the reality. The best 4K TVs also have excellent processors that do great upscaling of lower resolution content to 4K, and the difference between upscaling to 4K versus upscaling to 8K is marginal at best when viewed from normal distances. You're paying a huge premium for a marginal improvement in a process that's fundamentally a workaround for the lack of native high-resolution content. It doesn't make economic sense. Some salespeople will try to use gaming as a selling point, claiming that the newest gaming consoles or high-end gaming PCs can output 8K graphics. This is technically true, but extremely misleading. The PlayStation 5 and Xbox Series X both claim to support 8K output, but in reality, almost no games actually run at 8K resolution on these consoles. And the few that do are usually older or simpler games that are upscaled to 8K rather than being rendered natively at that resolution. The hardware in these consoles simply isn't powerful enough to render modern, graphically intensive games at 8K resolution with acceptable frame rates. Developers are choosing to target 4K resolution with higher frame rates, better lighting, more detailed textures, and other graphical improvements, rather than pushing for 8K, because they know that's where the actual visual improvement lies. On the PC gaming side, yes, you can build a computer with multiple high-end graphics cards that can theoretically render some games at 8K resolution. But the cost of that hardware is astronomical. We're talking $3,000 to $5,000 just for the graphics cards alone, and the frame rates you'll achieve are often still not great, even with that expensive hardware. The vast majority of PC gamers, even enthusiast gamers with expensive setups, are gaming at 1440p or 4K, because that's where you can achieve high frame rates with excellent graphics quality without needing to take out a second mortgage to afford the hardware. We might be reaching a point where 4K becomes the permanent standard for consumer content, much like how standard definition stayed at 480i for decades before HD came along, not because the technology to go higher wasn't available, but because the cost-to-benefit ratio didn't make sense. 8K might end up being used in professional production for future-proofing and for creative flexibility in editing, but never actually distributed to consumers in native 8K format. If that happens, and there are strong indications that it might, then everyone who bought an 8K TV will have paid extra for nothing. So what's the bottom line here? In 2025, 8K TVs are an expensive solution to a problem that doesn't exist. They're offering a resolution increase that most people can't perceive at normal viewing distances for content that doesn't exist and may never exist in mainstream form, at prices that are significantly inflated compared to 4K alternatives that offer better overall picture quality in real-world use. The marketing around 8K is designed to make you feel like you're missing out if you don't buy the highest number. But the reality is that resolution is just one speck among many. It's not even the most important one for picture quality once you get past a certain baseline. If you're shopping for a TV right now, save your money, skip the 8K models, and invest in a high-quality 4K TV with excellent contrast, color, motion handling, and HDR performance. You'll get a better viewing experience for everything you actually watch. You'll spend less money up front, and you won't be paying an early adopter premium for technology that hasn't proven its value yet. And if 8K does eventually become important and worthwhile years from now, the TVs available then will be so much better and cheaper than what's available today that you'll be glad you waited. Don't let anyone convince you that 8K is something you need right now, because unless you have extremely specific professional needs or money is literally no object to you, it absolutely is not. This is the kind of honest information that manufacturers don't want you to think about too carefully because it kills sales of their highest margin products. But you deserve to know the truth so you can make an informed decision about where your money goes. If this breakdown helped you understand why 8K isn't worth it in 2025, hit that subscribe button for more content cutting through marketing hype and giving you the real story on consumer electronics. Drop a comment below if you have questions or if you've been tempted by 8K marketing and want to share your thoughts. And remember, the best TV isn't the one with the highest numbers on the spec sheet. It's the one that delivers the best picture quality for the content you actually watch at a price that makes sense for your budget. Thanks for watching, and happy TV shopping with your money staying in your wallet where it belongs.